שיר למעלות, אשא עיניי אל ההרים, מאין יבוא עזרי. עזרי מעם אדוני, עושה שמיים וארץ, אל ייתן למוט רגליך, אל ינום משומרך. הנה לא ינום ולא יישן, שומר ישראל. אדוני שומרך, אדוני צילך, על יד ימינך. יומם השמש לא יככה, וירח בלילה. אדוני ישמורך מכל רע, ישמור את נפשך. אדוני ישמור צאתך ובואך, מעתה ועד עולם, מעתה ועד עולם.
I want to welcome everyone and thank you for coming today as we remember and honor the life of Jorge Topelson. This is hard to be here. It's hard to be here because our hearts are breaking, and yet it's important to be here to honor his memory, his legacy, the impact he had on all of our lives. Please silence your phones if you haven't already, out of respect for all of us in the family, as we continue with the words of Psalm 23.
Adonai ro'i lo echsar, bino deshe yarbitzeni, al mei menuchot yenaleni. נפשי ישובב, ינחני במעגלי צדק, ינחני במעגלי צדק, למען שמו. גם כי אלך בגיא צל מוות, לא אירא, רק אתה עמדי. שבטך ומשענתך המה ינחמוני. תערוך לפניי שולחן נגד צורריי. דשנת ושמן ראשי, עושי רוויה. אך טוב וחסד ירדפוני כל ימי חיי, כל ימי חיי. ושבתי בבית אדוני לאורך ימים. אדוני רואי לא אחסר. אדוני רואי לא אחסר.
Adonai is my shepherd, I shall not want, giving me repose in green meadows, leading me beside the still waters to revive my spirit, guiding me on the right path, for that is God's essence. Though I walk through a valley of the shadow of death, I fear no harm, for you are with me. Your staff and your rod comfort me. You prepare a banquet for me in the presence of my foes. You anoint my head with oil. My cup overflows. Surely goodness and kindness shall be my portion all the days of my life, and I shall dwell in the house of Adonai forever. I'm Rabbi Sarah Shulman. On behalf of Eitan Cantor and myself and the whole staff of HEA, we want to express our condolences to the Topelson family. It is related that the people of Rome spoke of Michelangelo as a man with 4 souls because he excelled in architecture, sculpture, painting, and poetry. His skill had produced many of the city's most beautiful buildings and statues. When Michelangelo was on his deathbed, a group of friends gathered at his bedside. One said grievingly, "Michelangelo, how will Rome get along without you?" With a weak wave of the hand toward the open window and beyond, witnessing the contributions which he had made, Michelangelo answered, "Rome will never be without me." Our community and your family will never be without Jorge Topelson during all the days of our lives. Jorge, like Michelangelo, was an artist and an architect, a builder of buildings, of developments, and most importantly, of families. He constructed a life of love and awe across the world, rooted in kindness, generosity, laughter, and learning. Jorge was born July 27th, 1942 in Warsaw, Poland, to parents Samuel and Esther. He grew up just outside the Warsaw Ghetto, and his family was saved from deportation to the camps because his father was a furrier, making furs for an SS officer neighbor. Samuel was able to save not only his families through his work and through his calm demeanor, but also the life of many other workers, Jews hired and whom he kept off the trucks and out of the trains to the death camps. At one point, the Gestapo came into his shop, which was right below where he and Esther lived. Jorge at the time was just a little baby being carried on Esther's shoulder. Thinking on the fly of how to save his family, Samuel said to Esther in front of the SS officer, as if he didn't know his wife, "Lady, what are you doing here?" And since Esther happened to be a blonde-haired Jew, the officers bought it and left the shop, and they were safe. The family left Warsaw as the danger surrounded them even more. Jorge was hidden in a farm in the countryside outside of Warsaw. Miraculously, his family survived, and Jorge was joined by siblings Alex, Marisha, and Sarah within a few short years. In 1947, the family left Poland and headed to France, where they connected with Jorge's great aunt, who happened to be the grandmother of Francine. Jorge's brother, Alex, came down with an infection and appendicitis just as the family was about to leave the country to seek refuge elsewhere. And so Esther and Samuel made the difficult decision to leave Alex with family for the time being while he recovered and headed on with their journey. The family thought they might immigrate to Palestine, but Jorge's grandfather cautioned them that there might be war imminently breaking out. And so instead, they went to Ellis Island only to be redirected to Mexico. 6 years later, they were finally able to reconnect with Alex in Israel. Jorge and his siblings grew up in Mexico City, attended a Jewish day school, Yiddish Hashul, and after high school, he attended the National University of Mexico City, where he studied architecture. Jorge always had an eye for design and art, and so after graduating, he became an architect and developer, and a successful one at that. At the age of 24, Jorge traveled with Alex to Israel for the Maccabi Games in 1966. On that fateful trip, he met Francine through their cousins. They communicated in lousy English, but what his English lacked was made up, Francine reported, by his good looks, sense of humor, and gregarious personality. The two made a strong and instant connection during this initial trip, but Jorge had to eventually go back to Mexico. He wanted to return to see Francine in Israel, but he couldn't get back in, so they met up in Europe instead. Jorge and Francine were married October 1st, 1967 in Tel Aviv, and then the couple moved to Mexico. Throughout the years, Jorge always supported Francine with whatever she wanted to do. He was a family man at heart. Their children, Ian, Gerardo, and Carolyn, were all born in Mexico City. Jorge loved being an active father who supported his kids' education and showed them his love for architecture and traveling the world. Carolyn shared that she learned an openness to other cultures and places from her papi. Ian spoke of how his father taught them the importance of family, and Gerardo, the importance of tzedakah, being honest and hardworking. Jorge supported many different family members throughout his life, as well as Jewish organizations and causes. Tzedakah starts in the family, he would say. He and Alex even designed a house for their parents in Mexico, which had a large hidden room, which his parents requested just in case somehow the SS came back. They never talked about the war much, but they were, in their own way, resilient survivors, if not in name, then certainly in spirit. In 1983, the family moved to Denver, Colorado, in search of better opportunities and more freedoms and security for the kids. Jorge and Alex continued their work together, building malls, houses, and more as partners. They are a family of architects. Jorge, Alex, and Sarita all work in the industry. Jorge lived a blessed life. As he would tell Francine, Pancha, don't expect anything from people. And if you happen to get something, it's unexpected reward. The greatest reward in Jorge's life was spending time with his beloved family especially his adoring grandchildren, Mark and Max, Sydney and Alana, Oren and Talia. "Where's my kiss and my hug?" he would ask them. He especially cherished spending Friday night dinners and the holidays together with his large, beautiful family. Jorge Topelson built buildings and he built lives. "I spent my childhood talking about bricks," Carolyn shared, "but also the building blocks for building a meaningful life." With the closeness that your family feels to one another, the last few weeks of Jorge's illness have been excruciatingly difficult. And all the while, Francine, you were at his side, and so was the family. When I visited Jorge last week at Swedish, I was touched by the way you spoke to your beloved husband. "Mi vida, te dueles?" Meaning literally, "My life, are you hurting?" Mi vida. Jorge was a life and a love to so many, a kind, funny, generous, and steady foundation for a remarkable family. May Jorge Topelson's memory, teachings, and the light he brought into the lives of others be a source of enduring blessing to his family and to all who loved him. May he now rest in peace. May God bring comfort to those who mourn. And let us say, Amen. It's now my honor to welcome up Jorge's grandchildren, Max and Mark, Sydney and Alana, Oren and Talia, while Max shares some words of memory and reflection.
Hi, everybody. For those who don't know who we are, I'm Max, Jorge's oldest grandchild, and I'm standing here with my brother Mark and my cousin Sydney, Alana, Oren, and Talia, as we honor the life and legacy of our beloved grandfather, Jorge. A few nights ago, after receiving the news about Jorge's passing, a few of my friends came over to my apartment in LA, and we shared a good bottle of wine. And one of them asked me a seemingly simple question: what will you tell your future grandchildren about your grandpa? The truth is, I was heartbroken and in shock, and I didn't have a good answer in the moment, but over the past few days, I've had a few moments to think and spend time with family, and I think it lies in the stories of the small, mundane moments of life. On Saturday mornings after Shabbat dinners, we'll drink coffee like Jorge would. When our grandkids run into the kitchen, we'll let them push down the French press like Jorge would, and probably give them half our breakfast muffin because we weren't that hungry anyways. At Shabbat dinners, we'll let our grandkids try sips of our wine despite head shakes from their parents like Jorge would. We'll tell stupid, silly grandpa jokes to make them laugh and help them cut the challah. When we sing the Kiddush, we'll change the word techila to tequila because some jokes never get old. We'll take our grandkids on fun vacations so they appreciate travel the way Jorge taught us. We'll teach them how to swirl the wine around the glass before tasting it, and more importantly, that wine is best enjoyed with your friends and family. When we all get married and grow old with our spouses, we'll love them like Jorge loved Pancha. And we'll love our kids and grandkids like Jorge loved us. You see, there's not one sentence or even a speech that encapsulates Jorge's essence. It's just the way we'll live the rest of our lives. Think of Jorge when we walk through the park, when we hug our parents, and when we put on our shoes. Think of Jorge when we read a book, when our kids get bar mitzvahed, and when we take the first sip of a nice glass of Malbec. We'll tell our grandchildren how special Jorge made us feel, and we'll treat them the same way because There's no way to truly understand a grandfather's unconditional love without experiencing it. He was generous, loving, kind, and the funniest guy I knew. And he was our grandfather. To be honest, I don't really know how to end this speech, and I didn't write anything to end it. So I think I'll tell some stupid joke because Jorge would probably like that. And in the words of my second favorite bald Jewish guy, Larry David, it's easy to be charismatic when you have a full head of hair, but to be bald and charismatic is a real diamond in the rough. And Jorge was definitely a diamond in the rough. He was the best guy ever, the coolest guy, and miss him dearly. Thanks. Let's go.
Thank you for your beautiful words. We now welcome up Ian to share some words about his father.
Thanks. Thanks everybody for coming, first of all. On a side note, very quickly, when I posted in Facebook that my father died, I was shocked how many people responded with condolences from college, dental school, colleagues, friends, long-time friends, short-term friends, and then family from abroad, parents, friends, etc. So thank you to all. So who was my dad? My dad was a very humble, caring, funny person, and smart. He was a Zionist, a family man. To my dad, family was extremely important. He made sure we all had a relationship with him. A small story that I never forgot. I was in dental school in Boston, and my dad calls me one day and says, "Hey, I'm going to be around the corner by you. Why don't you come and hang out with me? I'm going with my brother, and we're meeting my cousin, Rafi, and his wife, Ziva." I said, "Oh, perfect, Dad. Where are you going to be?" Thinking somewhere in the Boston area. Oh, no, Washington, D.C. But it's close enough for me to fly over there and hang out with them, which I did, which was really nice. And that evening that I arrived, we decided to go to an Italian restaurant. And I was driving the car, and my uncle Alex got out and went to get a table. And he comes back and says, "Oh, it's going to be about an hour." So my dad says, "Okay." So we hang out in the bar, drinking and talking to Rafi, which he used to live in Israel. So they only saw him once a year. So I go park the car, I come back, and sure enough, they have already a table. Not only any table, the best table of the house, right in the middle of the restaurant, which is what my uncle and my dad always liked. They thought we would be there 1.5 hours or so. After almost 4 hours, we left. Pre-drinks, multiple bottles of wine, after drinks, and through the whole time, we had a great time. And afterwards, my dad says, "For the first time, I consider you an adult, Ian." I go, "Oh, yeah, you can handle your alcohol like I do." So anyway, that was the first time, and that's why I never forgot it, because it was a unique experience, not only with my dad, but also my uncle and his cousin. It was the first, he liked to say a lot of jokes. Not the best ones, but he always had jokes. Many times the same jokes that my grandfather said. One of the most popular ones is, my grandfather also used to say to my grandmother, "I'm going to divorce you tomorrow." And my grandmother said, "Yeah, go for it." Never happened. He did the same thing to my mom. Never happened. He was a Jewish person. Religion was important to him in the traditions. Shabbat dinners, extremely important. It wasn't going to synagogue. It was the Shabbat dinners that were important. And the support to Israel. He never said no when we needed his help. Always wanted to do something for all of us. Financially, vacations, going to lunch, dinner. It did not matter while we were all together. His support of my mom was amazing. He made sure my mom could do whatever she wanted, help her whole family in Europe, allow her to get involved in volunteering in the community. I have always looked at this with admiration for all his accomplishments, from his love to the whole family and support, for all the homes, buildings he ever helped design and develop, how he interacted with people, how he was fair with everyone he worked for and with. To me, he was my hero, and I will always try to do as he did. I always try to be there too for my family as he was for me. I will never forget him. I love you, Dad.
Thank you, Ian. Now it's my honor to welcome up Gerardo Topelson to share some words as well.
I hope I can get through this, but we'll see. As I was thinking about what I was going to talk about today, I wanted to share some stories about my father. There were so many stories that I could recall, but it would take a lifetime to tell them all. So instead, I'm just going to talk about my father's life and how his actions and teachings have molded me into the person of who I am today. As a child, I learned from my father the value and the meaning of family. This was something very important to him. He taught us that our family is not just the five of us, but it extends to our extended family. Ever since I can remember, we would all get together every Friday night with my grandparents, my aunts, my uncles, and all my first cousins, and we would have Shabbat dinner. That continued when we moved to the States. In Denver, we would get together with our extended family here, my uncle and my cousins and my aunt, as well as some family friends from Mexico. It didn't matter to them whether there was a football game, a dance, or anything. Shabbat always came first, and we had to be there for dinner without exception. The next lesson that my father taught me was his love and support for his kids. My father always encouraged me to find the areas in which I would thrive. When I was in my late 20s, I was struggling to find meaning with my work. I didn't want to continue working for corporate America, and I wanted to move back to Denver. And I didn't know what I was going to do. So I spoke to him many, many times, trying to figure out what should I do. And he encouraged me to come and start a career in the construction industry. At the time I told him, I don't really know anything about that field. And he told me, don't worry, you can use your skills, your wisdom, and you'll be fine. And he also told me that if you need any help, I'll be there to give it to you. He then invited me to share office space with him and my uncle. At first, I got a wonderful office next to the printer. But pretty soon we moved to a bigger office, and then I had my own actual space. But he was right. It's been 25 years, and I'm still doing the same thing, so he must have known what I needed to do. But he gave me a great gift at that time that I didn't realize. He gave me $4,500. No, that doesn't mean that he gave me $4,500, but he gave me instead an opportunity to spend the last 25 years working with him and having over 4,500 lunches with him. Throughout, I think the most important thing that I got from that was the ability to spend time with him, to get to know him above and beyond as a father, but as a friend, as a confidant. We would talk about trips, we would talk about work, we would talk about everything imaginable. And that's the thing I'm going to miss the most. I would have loved to spend another 4,000 lunches with him. And I would like to tell him that I love you, I will miss you very much, but I will never forget you, and nobody else will.
Thank you, Gerardo. Now we welcome up little baby Carolyn to also share some words about her father.
My dad had a spectacular life. It started out difficult. He overcame persecution, anti-Semitism, and hatred. Born at a time when being Jewish was a handicap, and then moving to a Catholic country did not stop him. He was hardworking, loving, and always put family first. Born in Warsaw, Poland, as you heard before, in 1942, my father was a Holocaust survivor. However, he didn't consider himself a survivor. Frankly, a fact that always pissed me off and I always argued with him about. He felt that he was not a survivor because he had not been born in a concentration camp. His story, in his mind, was not equal to those people who had to strive in the concentration camps. Frankly, I think his story is equally as important. He was lucky. His entire family survived. He was hidden for a good portion of the war outside of Warsaw on a farm with his sister Marisha, his constant childhood companion. I will add that my grandparents had enough foresight not to circumcise him. Now, my father was a big joker, and when I was little, I never knew if he was telling me the truth or joking with me, to the point where every single time I talked to my dad, I'd go up to my mom and go, "Is he telling the truth?" I never knew when I was little. And frankly, I thought when he told me that he was circumcised and he remembered his circumcision, I was like, "Nah, Dad, you were 8 days old. How could you remember?" I really did not understand until I was much older that my father was circumcised not at 8 days old, but at 9 years old, and did in fact remember his circumcision. But this was the kind of thing that, because of my father's jokes, because of who he was, took me forever to understand what was true and not true. At the conclusion of the war, my grandparents were lucky enough to gather up their 4 children. And they moved to Mexico, and my dad and his siblings created a very close relationship. This closeness was always evident to me. One of the things that shows this closeness is that both his sister Sarita and brother Alex, both of whom were younger, followed in his footsteps to become architects. He then happened to work with Alex for the rest of his career, both starting in Mexico and then here in Denver, Colorado. I learned from my father the importance of family and ensuring that no matter the distance, whether they lived in Mexico, in Israel, in Paris, in London, New York, California, whatever, and whatever disagreements you may have with family, it didn't matter. It was always important to love your family, to be there for your family, and most importantly, to be there for your siblings. It's normal for me to think that there are family businesses where aunts and uncles and siblings work together, where cousins see each other daily. I realize that's not the norm, but that is my norm because of my father. My father was hardworking, dedicated, a lover of the arts, and a true explorer. He always worked hard to ensure that his family was taken care of. He taught me that it's through hard work and perseverance that you can achieve anything you set your mind to. He taught me not to give up, and even when things were hard, to keep trying. And he told me that if you sought it and dreamed it, it could probably occur. He taught me that it was dedication that was essential to creating a happy life. My dad loved to travel. Along with my mother, my father taught me that exploring other cultures, being open to new foods, that you will be experiencing very cool things. He taught me that the world is filled with unexpected beauty through different architecture, different arts, and even a different way of seeing the world. Even though as a child, I believe as Rabbi Schulman stated, I hated being dragged to see yet another thing of bricks, I recognize now that he taught me to see how things are beautifully put together, how we have to appreciate every piece of art because it's a representation and expression of life and love. Even in nature, we can find the beauty of architecture and art. For those of you who've been to my house, you will know that it is filled with artwork. Much of that artwork was given to me by my father because he felt that the importance of having art and color in the house is what made a house a home. What many of you don't know is that my favorite painting is one that my father painted for me when I was a teenager. He painted me a trilogy of flowers. To me, they look like Gerber daisies, which are my personal favorite flower, and they're of all different colors: blue, greens, reds, oranges, yellows. And this painting sits above my bed. Well, actually, it's 3 paintings. It sits about over my bed and has for the past 20 or so years. I could not imagine having a different painting over me while I sleep. It always makes me smile to think that my father painted it for me, to make sure that I had something beautiful to always look at. Through his art, you can see that my father loved the feminine figure and the way things moved. If you ever spent time with my father, you would know that he thought women were beautiful. And he loved telling them, even when it became uncouth, such as restaurants. But he never did it out of malice. He truly did it because he thought that women needed to hear that they were beautiful. When I asked my children what they remember most about their grandfather, they both told me that it was that Jorge, which is what they called him, always said that they were beautiful. My dad's a joker, so the next line would be, "Why do you think you're beautiful?" "It's 'cause you look like me, of course." All I can hope is that my kids will remember that their grandfather saw them as beautiful because they were loving and the good people that they will become, and he could see their neshama, their soul. In the past few days, I was reminded by my great aunt that my father always called me his little princess since the day I was born. He actually convinced me when I was little that I was the princess of the southern seas, a title that I hope to pass on to my children. The truth is, my father made me feel special for many years, and when I was young, my favorite part of the week was always Sundays, because that was the day that my dad and I would leave my mom, my brothers if they happened to be around, and we would go to Village Inn and have waffles. It was our very special time together. As I got older and the waffles at Village Inn became soggy, my mom started hating how we complained about the waffles. She bought us a waffle iron, and I learned to make waffles. My dad would watch me, but never participated because he was a horrible cook. And I continued this tradition well until I went off to college. I love this tradition. It gave us a time of something very special. And to this day, I still make waffles. I make them for my kids, and many times I made them for my father. And this summer, my dad came over a couple weeks ago, had my waffles and said, "Yep, you know how to make them. They're crispy and fluffy." I know that I will always think of him every time I eat a waffle, every time I share waffles with my children and my family. My father also taught me the importance of finding your soulmate. My parents' marriage is one that is to be envied. They were married for 57 years in 2 days. They were the best of friends, and they shared many adventures. They taught me that when you find your true love, it should be easy. And while there may be times of strife, you have to have faith that you can make it through with your partner. They taught me that you have to support one another and encourage the other to do things that make them happy. My dad was always there for my mother. He always encouraged her to do what made her happy. And I know he was also there for my brothers and myself and his grandchildren because all he ever wanted was for everyone to be happy. At my wedding, My father's advice to my husband was, just don't get old. Well, my father was taken too early, unexpectedly. He never got too old and always remained young at heart. He was always planning the next adventure. While he will not be able to join us on this next adventure, I know that we will go on it with his spirit in our hearts. I loved my father greatly, and I know that his spirit will continue in our hearts. The stories we tell, the jokes Gerardo has, they are many of my father's, and through our dedication to family, our ventures. I love you so much, Dad.
It's now my honor to welcome Meyer Saltzman, a close friend of Jorge, to share some words.
The last few days have been a blur since Francine called me. And I tried to remember when I met Jorge and Alex. And it goes back 50 years ago when I received a phone call from a friend of mine, Paul Barron, who was a builder contractor in Denver. And he said, I'd like you to meet a couple of guys who moved up from Mexico and have settled with their families, and they're looking for an accountant. And I had a CPA firm at that time, and we met them and started a very long professional relationship. But more important to me, it became a very personal friendship with both George and Alex. In thinking about George, I think all of us have heard and discussed the word of what bench means. And I looked it up on Wikipedia and tried to get a definition of what that really means. And I came up with some comments that relate strictly to a person like George Topelson, Jorge. A particularly good person, a person with integrity and honor, dignity, a sense of what is right, and George was a very special bench. I could not have had a better partner in business than George, but more importantly, he was a dear friend for over 50 years. I could tell a lot of stories about our relationship over that time, but I remember one that happened just a number of months ago. Jorge and I would drive down to Colorado Springs, where we had some property, at least once a month, and meet with our property manager, discuss whatever we had going at that time. And I always drove. Jorge calls me and says, I bought a new car and I want to drive. I said, fine. So we took his new Tesla SUV and we drove down I-25 to Colorado Springs. And I look over on the speedometer, he's doing 95 miles an hour in a 70 zone. And I said, Jorge, you gotta reduce the speed. So in an electric car, if you take your foot off the accelerator, the car stops. So now he's doing 30 miles an hour in a 75 zone. So I said, Jorge, speed it up. Wrong thing, he's now back up at 95. This went on for the entire trip and return. And when we got home, I said, Jorge, I got to do two things. One, I got to call a doctor because my neck is killing me. And I'm driving in the future. And P.S., he got rid of the car. George had a tremendous love and pride in family. He loved Francine very dearly and was overjoyed with his children and his grandchildren. Jerry and I were delighted the many times we were able to sit on Shabbos at a dinner at George and Francine's house with all the family. If you've never enjoyed anything, you've enjoyed Francine's cooking and baking. It is very, very special. But the family is so dear to myself and my wife, Jerry, that being here is very difficult in losing such a trusted friend. George was a true blessing in my life, and his life was a gift to both Jerry and I. I will always miss him, but I will always keep him in my heart. Thank you.
Thank you, Meyer. We now invite you to rise as you're able to for the El Maleh Rachamim Memorial Prayer.
שוכן במרומים, אמצא מנוחה נכונה תחת כנפי השכינה, במעלות קדושים וטהורים כזוהר הרקיע מזהירים את נשמת גרשון בן שמואל ואסתר שהלך לעולמו בגן עדן תהי מנוחתו אנא בעל הרחמים אז תראהו בסתר כנפיך לעולמים וצרור בצרור החיים את נשמתו אדוני הוא נחלתו וינוח בשלום על משכבו ונאמר Amen.
Exalted, compassionate God, grant infinite rest in your sheltering presence among the holy and the pure to the soul of Jorge Topelson, who is gone to his eternal home. Merciful One, we ask that our loved one find perfect peace in your enduring embrace. May his soul be bound up in the bond of life. May he rest in peace. And let us say, Amen. You may be seated. Immediately after the service today, the family will be going to Mount Nebo Cemetery for burial. Shiva will continue back at the home of Francine, 6024 South Akron Way in Greenwood Village. Visitation will be held today from 5 to 8 p.m. with Minyan at 7 p.m. And a correction for those of you that got the Shiva handout, I want to note that there will also be Shiva Monday and Tuesday with visitation from 4 to 8 p.m. and Mariv Minyan at 7 p.m. on both Monday and Tuesday nights as well. If you have any questions, feel free to ask myself or one of our staff or one of the folks at Feldman. This time we welcome up Jim Cohen.
Ladies and gentlemen, that does conclude our service here at the Hebrew Educational Alliance. We will have interment at Mount Nebo Memorial Park. Everyone is invited. However, we do not have an escorted procession today. So if you'd like to join us at the cemetery for interment, we'll ask you to start making your way as quickly as you can. You are welcome to follow the hearse in the family car. However, just like us, you need to follow all state laws as well. So we again ask you to return to your cars as quickly as possible. One last request is, please, if you see the family in the foyer or in the restroom or anywhere that they're gathering their items, please allow them to do what they need to do and then let them get back to their cars. Save expressing your condolences for the Shiva home. We'll ask you to rise at this time as we escort the family in the casket.
Shalom Aleichem, Malachei Asharei, Malachei Elyon, Mi Melech, Malachei Amelachim, HaKadosh Baruch Hu. Bochem leshalom, Malachei Shalom, Malachei Elyon, Mi Melech, Malachei Amelachim, HaKadosh Baruch Hu. Baruchuni leshalom, Malachei Shalom, Malachei Elyon, Mi Melech, Malachei Amelachim, HaKadosh Baruch Hu. Tzedchem leshalom, Malachei Shalom, Malachei Elyon, Mi Melech, Malachei Amelachim, HaKadosh Baruch